Last year did his CELTA and did your Delta this year, and next year who knows? Thing on Tdl for us tonight, a fantastic technique. Looking forward to it. And next week I'll be handing these out for next week's event. Anyway, tonight
Alright, first of all, I hope none of you were here for Steve Darn's TTT. Because I don't want to compare them to me. Yeah. When I was 4 or 5 years old, my dad took me to the swimming pool one day. I had done before, but I always used to hang out in the shallow end and like play with the water and kick my legs. So he takes me to the swimming pool. He has my stupid stuff, and he's holding my hand, and he goes right past the shallow end. I'm like, dude, this is me here. Just come with me. And he takes me. We go right to the deep end. Picks me up, throws me in the middle of it. The 5 seconds it took me to get back to the side of the pool to my dad, probably the most terrifying seconds of my life. So I get back to him, I'm panting, I'm out of breath. He holds me, he hugs me, I'm like, okay, I'm safe now. And he says, son, you need to use your legs more. Same story, I come back, picks me up. What's wrong with your arms? Back in the water. Yeah, the second time was terrifying. Yeah, the third time was terrifying, but not as much as the first time. Later on, when I actually became a teacher, I realized that my dad was teaching me swimming with the methodology of Tdl. Now, what is Tdl? Tdl stands for, can anyone tell me? Task-based learning. It's also known as TBI, which stands for very good, task-based instruction. TBLT, task-based language teaching, and TBLL, language learning. Excellent. It became really famous in the mid-1990s with the Willises, Jane Willis and Dave Willis, which, surprise, surprise, the wife did most of the work, but the husband's getting equal credit for. But they weren't the pioneers. They weren't the pioneers of Tdl. The real pioneer of Tdl was a guy called Prabhu in the almost 10 years prior to the Willises. But they had 2 slightly different types of Tdl, which we will talk about later. Now, in a Tdl lesson, as the name suggests, in a task-based lesson, the whole lesson pivots around one task. So we have the task. Everything else that happens in the lesson is placed around that task. We can define this task as any kind of real communication between the students that has a language outcome. Literally any kind of communication. There are 2 other fancier definitions given by Noonan and Jane Willis. I'm not going to bore you by reading it, just take a look at it. Then I can take. So basically, what we say in Tdl, what happens in Tdl, is we say, let's take the focus off of structures, of grammar, and let the students communicate. Let them talk. Let them get something done instead of burdening them with structures, with grammar, making them, forcing them to use one thing. The main distinction to Tdl would be something that we all love and we teach the thing out of it all the time in our classes. PPP. So there are 2 exact opposite ends of teaching. We will get to that comparison later. I could go on for ages, it's not going to make that much sense before we actually do something. So together we're going to do a Tdl lesson, and then we'll analyze it and see what happened. we're going to watch a short video. You're my students. We're going to watch a short video. You have two tasks as you're watching. One, do you know what this program is? Have you ever watched it before? And two, what are the people doing here? What are they preparing for? So are we watching it or?
There's all kinds of dangers. Earthquake, catastrophic collapse, George Turkey,
End of the world as we know it.
That's great. It starts with here we go. This is your emergency preparedness toy store right here.
If the world comes to an end, I'll make this video start.
The extent that my wife and I go to is probably, let's say, insane.
There's Timothy in the room.
It would be like somebody instantly flipped the switch on the wall.
Find a partner, you're all teachers. Talk about it. So, what can you tell me? Has anyone watched Doomsday Preppers before? Yes, you go, Julie.
I have.
Thank you. Can you tell us what it's about?
Well, it's about people who are preparing for basically the zombie apocalypse. And they go to outrageous extremes. I mean, these are people who have bunkers, who get food and, you know, fill these bunkers with food. They go on survival tactic courses. They train their children to do that. They have like hazmat days where everybody's kind of doing a drill, and, you know, what happens if there's like a chemical bomb, or you have to put on your hazmat mask and things like that. And they go to, they have doomsday parties, they exchange best practices with other families. Yeah. It's really crazy. It's really, they're very serious.
Get down.
Yeah, they're very serious about it.
Good, excellent. Well, today we're going to become Doomsday Preppers. We're in a city. Everyone has left the city. There's only 4 of us remaining. The city is filled with zombies. We get one trip to the supermarket and one trip to the hardware store. While we're in the supermarket, we have a limited number of items available, but we cannot take all of them. We cannot carry. So we can only choose 7 items to take with us back home. In the hardware store, we can only take 5 items from the hardware store. What we're going to do now, with your partners, this is going to be 2 by 2. Choose the top 7 food supplies that you think would help you out. 4 of you, 1 month in a house. 7 items of food, 5 tools, and we have some assumptions about the place that we're going to be living in. So there's no running water, no natural gas, electricity comes and goes, you can't depend on it. and you do not have appliances in the house. Just a couple of beds, a little bit of furniture. So with your partners, decide what top 7 foods and why. That's the main question. Why would you choose it? Because you're going to have to convince other groups to choose it. Take one for the
Watch people fantasize him sharing.
I always go for guns. There I say it.
does every pair have their 7 items of food and 5 items of tools?
Yes.
Good. What we're going to do, now we're going to discuss with another pair, and the 4 of you have to come up with one list. So if you're sharing anything, the things that you're not sharing, try to convince the other group that yours is better. That's what you need to do. Yes. So, Peter? Wait, you guys?
you're right.
Who's doing it?
Okay, let's start together.
All right, cool. Well, first of all, well done. I was watching you. Excellent choices. And I think we're going to see a good debate going on. How was it? How did you find this activity to your students? Was it easy to convince your friends, or was it hard to convince your friends? They weren't accepting Let's start with this group. Can you tell us the choices that you made and why you made them?
It had canned food, frozen meat, not frozen meat. No, sorry, yes. But they persuaded us
To change it.
yeah, Nutella because I love it. No, that wasn't okay. Bottled water, alcohol.
Of course.
Yes.
No debate.
Because she doesn't drink, but it's not about drinking actually, it is about this is sanitation maybe, about
It's a little bit about the
We're
drinking.
going to.
Maybe when you feel depressed, you need to
Yeah.
Depressed, tired, hungry, just woke up, you're gonna go to bed.
no reason to.
Now, why did you cross off the frozen meat? Why not?
There's no use.
Can you guys tell me about the tools that you chose? What tools did you choose?
We went for the gun, obviously. Torch instead of using matches and lighters. That's a bit of the axe instead of the sword.
It's cooler.
Yeah, it's better for the combat as well. Axe was so you're not going to do anything.
The
Roast.
sword was actually for you to commit suicide.
And then wrote the first aid kit.
Cool. Does anybody have any other tools different from what these guys have chosen? Everyone chose the exact same tools? That is amazing. You have Swiss knife. Oh yeah, so one of the 5 tools will be to repair canned food.
Because it works for everything. So it's the same.
Do you think they can persuade you to change this?
No, we're going to use an axe.
They are really good.
IH teacher group at the back. You guys, what food did you choose?
We're still debating, I think. So why have you got
We got canned food, because I think that's an obvious one. We've got fresh fruit, because I'll explain that later. We've got a jar. We've got a jar of honey, because it's like really good for antiseptic and like healing wounds. And we're gonna preserve the fruit in the jar. We got a box of biscuits. I do not know why.
I think that was Julie's choice.
I give up the code. I can't.
And we got a piece of cheese to use as penicillin as antibiotics. You can, let it mold and use it as antibiotics. And we got bottled water and alcohol.
Alright, cool. Any different items of food that you guys chose that were not on these lists? Do you have any other items of food that these guys didn't say? Bag of crisps. Okay, and it doesn't go bad, does it? Could be a good idea. Alright, excellent. Now, as you were talking, I was listening to you. There were some sentences that I'm not really sure if you said them right. What was the first one?
It broke my heart.
Again, Julie's choice. Is there anything you would change in this sentence?
Jelly.
First, say that we made here. We say, I agree, and I'm agree. And should, do we use it with to?
No.
So, I agree with you. We should choose a jar of jelly. What about this one?
Willing or vain.
Is there any way that we can combine the two of them together?
No.
Maybe.
Good. We might. Or may. Excellent. What about this one?
We shouldn't. We shouldn't.
The structure is correct, right?
Yes.
It's not wrong. But the use of have to here, don't have to. Would you say it's the correct choice? Is it the best thing that we just said? What else could we say?
Shouldn't. Say we don't need to.
Is it that we don't need, or is this person saying no, don't do it?
No.
We can't, maybe we can't say.
So maybe we say we can't, or we mustn't. And this last sentence. You're wrong and you're stupid. I'm right.
That's wrong. Perfectly fine.
Grammatically.
Correct structure, yeah.
Is there any polite way that we can say this?
I don't agree with you. I
You're
don't
not
feel the
quite
same
right.
way.
Good. You can say. I don't agree with you. Or. And then give.
Yeah.
You have a point? No.
Okay. Now, the lists that you have, they're final. We do not change them. Laminate them. Now we're actually going to move into the house. This is our house with the zombies and everything. We're going to store what we've bought into this house. The places that we can store stuff. 1, the attic. 2, the basement. And 3, if the thing hits the fan, we need to go to the shelter. So if the zombies are actually able to come into the house, we have a shelter to run over to. But there's one small problem.
They don't have connections.
That is one other problem, yes. It's also a problem.
You have to go out.
So first of all, yeah, you need to go out of the house to go into the shelter. And 2, you don't have enough storage space. What you can do, and you cannot change your items because you've already chosen your items. In the attic, you can fit 50 items. In the basement, you can fit 100 items. In the shelter, you can fit 50 items. The items that you have, now choose how many of them you want. 4 of you, 1 month. Think about it. How much water, for example, would you need? You have 1 liter water bottles. How many would you need to survive for 1 month? How much jelly, or how much whatever you've chosen? Place it in different parts of the house. And do this with your new big groups, not with your pets.
We can choose 2 different items. Yeah, so we need to divide these and allocate.
And you have 4 minutes for this thing.
How much water? You have to do 1 more.
Guys, you have a new. Can you just brief me on what we're doing? Is that what for example, 25 minutes, 10 in the Now, because we're short for time, I'm going to skip the last feedback. So we're going to do another. We would have done another feedback on this part, and then. All right. What we did right now was a full week Tdl lesson. And when I say week Tdl lesson, I don't mean the lesson was weak, it was awesome, because I was a teacher. But we have two different types of Tdl, weak and strong, which I will get into. Can you guess the stages that we need to go through in a Tdl lesson based on what we did? Can you tell me more?
Prediction.
Exposure.
Good. Task preparation.
Exactly.
The task and the feedback.
Exactly. Good. I'm going to put the stages on the board as suggested by Jane Willis. These are the stages that we start with a pre-task. This is called the then we go to the task cycle. And this is where strong Tdl and weak Tdl are discriminated. Take a look at this structure with your pairs, not in the big groups, just with one partner. Can you identify which one was which of the things that we just did now? The stages that we just went through. Pre-task, task cycle, and language focus. We went through all 6 stages. Do you think you can actually find them? Very good. Choosing one person, deciding how you're going to present it to the class, how you're going to give your reasons. That would be the planning stage. And report was when we all did it together. Up to here, all different kinds of TBL share these stages. From here on, it gets different. In a strong Tdl lesson, which Prabhu, guy that did it in the 1980s, introduced it for the first time, he said there should be no language focus. If we're actually getting them to do the task, just let them do the task and get it over with. Do not go back and check what they did, do not give them feedback, do not analyze language. Just let them do the task over and over with different tasks, they're going to learn. But the Willises, and Rod Ellis, Noonan, Pika, all the other big names in TBL, they decided that we TBL could be more beneficial when it comes to teaching. How? They added a language analysis part. But it's a little different with the normal feedback we give. I put 3 Fs here. Could you, and they mean feedback. Feedback 1, feedback 2, feedback 3. Did you realize where I gave these Fs, feedbacks? The first one, F1, so you acknowledge that they've actually done what they were asked of to do. Good, well done. You've actually chosen 7 items of food and you've chosen 5 tools. Second feedback was on the content of task. Was it easy or was it difficult to change the ideas and the opinions of your partners? Did they listen to you? Did they not listen to you? This was the task. The task was not choosing, I mean, as teachers we're talking now. The task was not choosing 7 items of food and 5 items of tools. The task was actually getting them to talk to each other. So this is the content of the task. How was it? Did you find it easy? Did you find it hard? How did you communicate? And feedback 3 was the language analysis. So 2 on the communication, that's what was important for us. 1 on the language analysis. And the practice at the end was, hopefully, using the same language that we make mistakes with in the next part. Again, giving suggestions, giving your ideas, agreeing, disagreeing. Now this lesson didn't have to be This lesson didn't have to be about models and about agreeing, disagreeing functions. That's the whole point of TDL. It's about emerging language. The feedback that I put here was from a lesson that I did previously, and that was what I got out of it, but it could have easily been anything else. So that's the whole point of TDL. Don't go in with a language focus. Go in, let them do what they're doing, see what emerges, and work on that. I forgot what I was going to say next. All right. Yeah. Next thing I want to ask you is that when I started this workshop, I said the distinction to TBL would be PPP. Yeah. How would you find it different to PPP? What differences would you say this style has directly, this methodology to PPP? Again, for just 1 minute, discuss with the parents and that's all.
first. We do the cart before the horse. It means that we start the production rather than we put it into, postpone it to last step. So we start the production.
Exactly.
Then, the second one is control practice. We don't have any control practice in task-based language teaching. So we produce a language, and then we do a kind of language.
Exactly.
So that's, but the first presentation part, the task-based, you also had a kind of presentation. I mean, not to present the language, but you present how the task is going to be. So it's kind of professional, even though the devil said already that you could have introduced the vocabulary, because you didn't, but you took it for granted that we already know the words, which...
Either granted, you're right, or you just don't care. If it emerges, that's when you deal with it.
Sorry, I'm just going to add one more point. I'm getting off the topic here. Task-based works with the fluent speakers. They say. So some people criticize it doesn't fit the new learners.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, if you want to do it with the new word, new beginners, you already need to also introduce the vocabulary at the beginning, so which makes it look similar to the other PPP.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's, I think, where the first difference between PPP and TDL comes. In PPP, we always focus on one structure. We're doing simple present tense, we're doing present perfect today, we're doing past continuous today. And that's what we hope to get at the end of the lesson. While in TBL, teacher does not attempt to control. Like, let it go, see what emerges, see what comes out. Second main difference would be, in PPP, we always focus on the form. That's what we want to get from the students. So at the end of the lesson, they can say, I have watched 25 movies in my life. Use present perfect. While again, in TBL, the focus is on the meaning. We want them to get something across. So as our friend said here, the focus is mainly on fluency, on meaning. Get them to talk. While again in PPP, the focus is on accuracy. Get them to say it correctly. Next one. The teacher always controls learner language. It's always very restricted. The stages that we go through, presentation, control practice, semi-control practice. At the end, we give a freer practice. So basically what happens is, if you're giving them a matching activity, there isn't much creativity they can have. There's only going to be one type of emerging language. While in TDL, they're allowed to pause, they think, they decide what kind of language they want to use with no pressure on them to use a specific kind of structure. And the last one, the success of a PPP lesson is judged on, were my students able to use this structure at the end of the lesson? Could they use a sentence in past continuous? While in TBL, we just say, could they do it? Did they communicate? Did they talk with each other? If they did, that's a successful lesson in TBL. I'll give you a second for this. We're almost done.
Complete the task.
Now, Jane Willis proposed a six-fold division for the tasks. I've put it here for you. Again, I'm not going to bore you with reading them. There's six main different types of tasks that we can have in a TDL lesson. I'm pretty sure there might be more, but this is what's suggested by Jane Willis. I'm not going to read it for you. Now, could you suggest, in your opinion, any activities that could be considered a task for a TDL lesson? Excellent. I've tried to divide it into different levels that can be used, but again, I'm not going to read it. Just to And these are 6 out of like a million. There are so many different things that we can do in TDL. These are just some famous examples of what we can do. So, the final thing I'm going to say about the good things about TDL before completely destroying it is why would we do this? Why would we flip the lesson around? So it's basically we're doing a PPP lesson, we're just starting from the deep end, like what my dad did to me. He just threw me in there and said, learn to use your legs, learn to use your arms. What would be the most important thing that we can get out of such a lesson?
Realism.
Exactly, that's one of them, but in real life.
They are learning something while they are doing something.
Yeah, they're true experience.
Exactly. In terms of language focus, how can it help us? How can we benefit from it? Just in terms of language focus.
It's the language that they need to use all their existing knowledge of language actually. So it's practice, a chance for good practice.
Exactly, that's the point here. They need to use everything that they know, and sometimes they need to say stuff that they don't know how to say. This is where TBL helps us, and it's called noticing the gap. So when they're saying something and they cannot express themselves for any reason, we hope as teachers that at that time they notice the gap. Like, oh, I can't disagree in a polite way. I can't give my opinion. I don't know how to say this. So when they're actually taught this part of the grammar, they'll be more receiving and more open to it. Because usually students have studied grammar a million times. If you tell them that we're going to do present perfect today, they're like, but they can't really use it. Hopefully, that's what a teacher could hope for. At the end of the TDL lesson, the student's like, oh damn, yeah, I really can't use present perfect. And they notice the gap. Alright, let's go to bad stuff. What do you think is wrong with TDL? What negative things can we say about TDL? Yeah.
We have fixed language environment when the focus on the language. I mean, the exams are based on the proficiency of the students in terms of what they know about and not how they use the language. Students may not be motivated enough to work in the educational settings like Turkey in the normal language classes.
That's exactly the most important one. It's not really testable. How can you test a lesson? If you do a full syllabus on TDL, using TDL, how can you really evaluate them at the end? So this is something that people say. One of the big problems. Anything else?
It's the tasks. I mean, ideally, you would, for example, let's say in Turkey, you can't tell your students go and order something at the restaurant because they can't do it in English. They would have to do it in
exactly. So this is number 2. It's like you've read my slide. Timing could be.
Because we have tight schedules and
with very close to classes.
Exactly. It's hard to control them.
Doing such tasks.
Exactly. And like what Judy said, if it's a monolingual class and the task is the main thing that they're trying to do, what do you think usually happens? Switch to L1. Easy as that. And you come back, they've done everything, but they've done the whole thing in L1. So ideally, for multilingual classes, it would work out.
Is it bad that the students do the group work in their native language?
Well, I don't know if it's bad, but it kind of defines the purpose. Because we're here to get them to communicate in English, to have any immersion mistakes that they have in English. If they communicate in their native language, they basically just got the task done, which I don't think is what we're actually after.
Or should we stop them when they talk in the native language?
Yes. Ideally.
In a group work?
Ideally, yes. But I mean, it usually doesn't happen because the groups are big. You control this group, that group speaking in their native language, you control this group. But ideally, yes, if we try to switch them back to
sometimes when we have times when students and they start to speak Turkish, but then they translate it. And they try to say, okay, they don't know how to say it in English, they first speak Turkish, then they translate it.
Yeah, I mean, when we start teaching, it's like never ever let students use one in the classroom and stuff. But then as we go on and we teach real classes, it's like, yeah, let it slip sometimes, if it's helping them. But as you said, if it's defining the purpose, if they're just speaking in their own one, we're giving you a list, that list is not what we're going for. Those are communication. So yeah, try to find something. Do you think we can actually make a full syllabus based on TDL? Ideally not. Okay. I mean, Jeremy Harmer, I was listening to one of his talks and he made this mistake once. He made a full syllabus just on TDL. It was like at the end of the year, I just wanted to teach them like one small structure. And they were like, no, doing the TDL, I'm not going to learn any structure. So yeah. Which kind of lessons would you think it's more useful for? What should the aim of that lesson be? Speaking. And the sub-aim on?
Actually, we can use this one for filler activities at the end of the whole grammatical structure things after the pre-teach sessions. Because it is hard to monitor the students at the same time. In Turkish schools, there are almost 40 students in one classroom. So even in this classroom, I don't know how many of us, it is hard to control everything. So we need to give more feedback and they can easily switch to L1. So it happens all the time.
That is not true. Yeah, so like our friend said, like we had it here, speaking lessons with the focus on
maybe speaking clubs. We have speaking clubs actually.
Or the speaking clubs with the focus on fluency. Yes, that would work out the best for us. And at the end, last sentence I want to say, is it really worth bringing TDL into our syllabuses? Why do we really need to use TDL? Is it worth it?
It's fun. Yeah.
It's fun, that is true.
It's easier because you let the students speak and they do the most of it. It is easier for the teacher.
It is easier for the teacher.
It's purposeful. It has a purpose actually. So when you have purpose, you communicate better.
That is also true.
I think it's motivating students to study.
It is also motivational.
They can see the product at the end of the session.
And they can realize that they actually know something.
Exactly. They actually did something. I've put all of this in 2 words. Shit happens. So, I mean, yes. A while back, GTM, only way people ever told me that was correct. All these other methodologies came at the beginning, they seemed stupid, but then they found their space. CLT, even at the beginning, no one really accepted it. But now it's got such a high place in teaching. TDL, my personal opinion, is coming up. And it's not going to be harmful to know how to do one lesson based on TDL. If any questions that I can answer, if not, I'm done. Thank you.